Can I just grab those and yank them out to the car?
No,
Soil, however, if we invest in soil, if we invest in trees, if we invest in gardens, and we invest in all of these natural systems, they look after themselves ultimately, and they're self propagating ultimately, which is sort of like the great vision of permaculture, is to create these sort of self-supporting systems that are designed for sustainable, regenerative human settlements. So we need to really think about that with the way that we direct our discretionary and even our non-discretionary income, in the way that, you know, if we're going to make a choice about building a house, well, then we should be looking at houses like this, using materials off the side. I mean, most of the timber that's in here has been sourced off this property, or at least locally. We're using straw bale walls here, which have been sourced from very locally. You know, and it's both of the sources of this material are regenerative and a lot better and low energy. So we've got materials that are low energy base and extremely local, and something that is actually helping out. If we go in and take the thinnings out of that forest, it's actually helping that forest to get better. So it's a regenerative activity to actually make this house. Now, if we go and dig a big hole in the ground and take coal out of it for a start and burn that and make electricity, and then we dig another hole out of the ground and big hole and take the clay out of that, and then use that coal-fired electricity to make bricks, then we haven't got anything regenerative at all. What's regenerative about that? We're just burning fossil fuels, and we're making a big hole in the ground, which is a mess. We go and make a house out of timber and straw and a bit of mud that you've got locally, and you've got a very, very regenerative activity.
Coming together with people of like mind that I never met before, and celebrating the community spirit of raising a building.
Right now we have a food system that's very heavily dependent on fossil fuel energy, all the way from all the fuel that goes into the tractors, all the energy it takes to manufacture the chemical pesticides, fertilizers, plus the transportation system that's hauling that food, you know, up to 2,500 miles to get to you. It's a very intensive fossil fuel driven food system that we become dependent upon, and I think everyone knows that there's severe limitations to the longevity of a fossil fuel driven system. First of all, we're going to run out of oil, but long before that we're going to be affected by climate change and all that carbon that's going from underground into the atmosphere. So I think a lot of what we're doing is kind of looking at some of these larger issues and saying, how do we look at our food system from a sustainability point of view? How do we look at changing it so that it's not dependent and reliant on a source of energy that's temporary, that has a lot of effects on the world?
Imagine if everyone in this country just grew their own lettuces. You'd probably watch the CO2, atmospheric CO2 levels just drop a notch, because all of those lettuces that are grown in California wouldn't need to be trucked here anymore. You know, the 3,000 mile lettuce would be no longer. And who can't grow lettuces? I mean, if you can't grow lettuces, well, you should be in the mud hut, really. And I'm not talking about this mud hut, I'm talking about the final mud hut. Okay, so we need to work with natural elements on our site. We need to do stock rotation. We need to do crop rotation. So we'll have maybe a pastoral phase in our crop rotation. So we have some pasture for a few years, and then we'll rotate that back into crop for a few years, and have an animal phase and all of that on the pastoral. So that's replenishing the system for the depletive phases of cropping. So the organic farmer doesn't have access necessarily to something, a high energy fertilizer that's come out of a bag, that's been processed using fossil energy, that's been transported to the site using fossil energy, cheap fossil energy. They also don't have access to the soil killing chemicals that soil life killing chemicals that conventional farmers have. And so they have to be much more creative with that. And those chemicals that are used, the herbicides, they kill any plants that are in the soil. Most of them are, well, you can get selective herbicides, of course, and you can get non-selective herbicides like glyphosate or Roundup, as it's commonly known. They just kill everything, apart from those plants that are genetically modified to cope with them. Fungicides are a common problem, a common thing used in systems, particularly in the United States, where you've got summer rainfall. You have a lot of rusts and a lot of issues with having a humid, moist or wet summer, and of course you're going to get rusts and funguses. So fungicides work very well at killing the fungus that is growing on these plants, but also goes through and kills the fungus which perform a very primary function of cycling the cellulose material of roots and crop residues in the soil. So how can we build organic matter up in our soil when we continue to bombard the system with acidifying fertilizers, herbicides, and which kill bacteria and other photosynthesizing microorganisms, and then fungi which start the whole process, the primary processes of cellulose decomposition in soils. Mm-hmm. So the organic farmer has all of those systems in their armoury, whereas the conventional farmer, well, he has to get everything that's an industrial product that has a very, very high oil price, and that's getting more and more expensive, and less of, thank goodness, less and less of a place potentially economically in our agricultural systems. That can't come soon enough.